Welcome, you guys. Today is a very important, today is one of the best days of your life if you want to have really great change. This is your show to be on. Listen, you're on the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life channel. I'm Vicki Helm. This is the Coffee Break Show, and it's brought to you by Metadime Digital Network. Now, you guys know that I read a lot of books, and I read a book just recently that completely changed how I'm going to be doing my finances in the future. And the book was written by this gentleman here. His name is Andrew Henderson, and he is the best-selling author of the book Nomad Capitalist. And I want everybody to go get this book. So I literally put it up here. I'm going to show it to you in just a second here so that you can, I'm just going to take a screenshot right here. Boom. You should be able to see this Nomad Capitalist book. You can see that it has been a bestseller for a very long time. And it just keeps plugging away because the information in this book is going to change your life. And I just want to take a moment and introduce to you, I'm just going to move this. Let me get this out of the way, Andrew. Sorry, I'm not really good at that little place there. But I want to introduce Andrew Henderson to you because he is somebody that specializes in, he's like the most sought after expert on global citizenship. And that is something that is very big going on right now. He lives by these 5 magic words that I just love. Go where you are treated best. And I want to start the conversation today with Andrew about what does it mean and how did he learn and what exactly does it mean to go where you are treated best. And welcome to the show.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be with you. Go where you're treated best was something my father talked about. He told me back in the mid-1990s when I was very young, I was interested in starting a business. I was interested in finance and the stock market when I was 12, 13 years old, kind of a weird thing to do, especially back then. But he said, listen, if you are going to be successful, this country being the United States, will not be the place to be anymore. It has been the great place for many decades. But he said, things are changing. He had looked into moving. He decided not to because he already had a family and he felt a great sense of obligation not to move us. But he said, listen, don't think you have to stay here with your family. Don't think you have to stay around and take care of us as many cultures require. We raised our children to take care of themselves, to be great contributors to the world, and you ought to go where you're treated best. And so it was a great permission slip as someone who watches so many people who talk about rising taxes, chaos in the world. They don't like the direction their country is going, whether it's the US or anywhere else. If you're an entrepreneur, all the guns are blazing for you now. And yet people talk about, I can't leave my family. How can I leave my family? Well, I meet my family and I have a family and I'm married and we travel together, but go where you're treated best. That was a great permission slip. And I think it applies to a lot of things.
Yeah, I think what's so important about what you're saying about that permission slip and what a forward-thinking father you had, a very forward-thinking father. I know a lot of times if you leave to go do business elsewhere, sometimes you're not seen in a good light anymore, like, oh, you took this elsewhere, you're making jobs for other people and doing other things. But in this world of global citizenship and global economics, I just don't think that the country-centric or even ethnocentric point of view helps people because the world has become a global citizenship world. The world has become something where we're all connected in this online way and offline way. But let me ask you something, because I read your book and I was fascinated at your viewpoint. And there's always a point where you transcend the current norm, and that gives you a more vast view about how to do business, why you want to live where you live, why you want to, and I don't think it's bad to want to lower your tax bracket. And I know there's a lot of people that think, we should take more money from the rich. And I think that viewpoint is robbing many societies of the best of their world. And there's always the thought that you have no other option than to take money from other people to make your livelihood and business there. But one of the things that fascinated me about your book that really was an eye-opener, and I had never thought of this, about having another passport. About I didn't even think that was possible. I mean, you've heard about it in kind of a black market way, like it's some undercover thing, but you have a lot of legal solutions for taxes, for getting citizenship in other places. And how did you come about working for in this manner? How did you decide this is the way I want to go?
Well, it's been over a dozen years now that I've been traveling around the world, and that's adapted as I've gone. I've spent where I've been a week in every different country. I go a week, and then I developed deeper relationships going a month for every country. Now I've built a network of homes around the world that I own as both investments and lifestyle properties that I spend time in. So I'm not in hotels, I'm not in Airbnbs, I'm running a business. But for me, it has been all those years of seeing how the world works. And what I always say is, too many cultures say, well, that's how we do it here. You can always tell a failed culture or perhaps a failed person when they say, well, that's how we do it. And I think that, I've left the United States, I've been out for long enough, and I've seen that a lot of countries do things better than the US, more efficiently, more cost effectively, whatever, they get nicer, whatever it may be. But the US also does some things that are good. But the problem is no one wants to get together and basically say, hey, let's take the best of all of this. Let's build. Now, I mean, maybe you look at a place like a Dubai and they've said, hey, let's bring in the experts and figure out, how do you build the best building? How do you do this? So maybe, there are some places like that. But what's fascinating to me is, I was born in 1984. The US was the best country in the world to be born in. Now it's nowhere close. And what you actually have now is 4 recently ex-communist countries which have greater economic freedom than the United States. And so that's what I've seen in my travels. Wow. You have former Soviet republics that are now more free. I've been talking about Georgia. I say,
I was thinking of Georgia because you mentioned a lot.
Right. I mean, people wouldn't have been talking about it, right? But I was talking about it. And so they are freer than the US. And so people have so many stereotypes. I was just talking about Istanbul, interesting market, I think, for investment. People talk about buy when there's blood in the streets. I've been to Istanbul. I know Istanbul very well for many years. And people want to talk about Muslim country, and they want to repeat the same things they hear on the BBC or on Fox News, whatever the case may be. So what I've seen in these 13 years or so of traveling is, oh, I can get a better interest rate over here. Or I go to Singapore and I realize these banks are much stronger, much more liquidity, or this passport's better. I come from the US where the passport, no matter where you live in the world, you're taxed. And so I started looking at, well, how do I protect myself from that? So it's been financial strategies, it's been citizenship strategies, it's been lifestyle and investment strategies, because I've seen all this stuff with my eyes and I've realized what you're seeing on the television isn't true.
Yeah, Andrew, I really want to talk about that for a second, because you just mentioned something that I want to go deeply in that I don't think many Americans know. You said the American passport means that you're going to be taxed anywhere you go. There's a tax burden with that. And I want to go a little bit more, let's go a little deeper and explain to them what that means if you're an American and you have an American passport.
Right. So there's a number of different taxation systems in the world. The United States and an African nation named Eritrea. And you see China and South Africa kind of trying to get into this game. But for now, it's basically those two countries tax their citizens based on their citizenship. Now, if you live in Canada or Ireland or Australia, they're going to have worldwide taxation of residents. You have the opportunity to leave. And so I'm helping people from all these countries. They move from Australia to Dubai. They move from Canada to Thailand, etc. But the challenge is if you're an American and you move to Thailand, you are going to be taxed. You're going to have to file all the reports. You have to file your foreign bank account. I have friends who live in Switzerland, who live in so many places. They have a bank account to live, to buy groceries, but they're subject to the law where they have to report their bank accounts under penalty of a lot of fines and jail time and everything. If they don't report that bank account, they've got a problem. It's the account they pay their mortgage with. They're not, tax evading fat cats. They're just living in Switzerland. They're living in Canada. I had a guy, he lived in Australia, and he had a big US tax problem. He's already paying lots of tax in Australia, but the US government still wants to know your business. They want you to report all of your assets. And, you do get an exclusion. You can exclude, in 2021, it's going to be $108,700. Now, if you're just an individual freelancer or you have a job, then you're not going to be able to get out of payroll tax. If you have a company and it's offshore, then you can really pay nothing on that first $108,000. But what's changed in the last couple of years is what you make above that, now you need a more complicated structure to reduce your tax. And so if you're an American, the paperwork burden is always going to be there. And if you're making over $100,000, you're going to have to put in place a more complex structure to reduce your taxes, maybe into the single or low double digits. And so you cannot escape that until either you move to Puerto Rico and that becomes your main home, or which is 0%, 4%, that kind of tax, or you expatriate, you renounce your US citizenship, you have that second passport, and now you play under their rules and they don't tax you wherever you go.
And it's interesting too, because sometimes, some years, I paid so much in tax, and I get it to the point where I go, I could have hired 3 more people this year if I didn't have to pay that tax. I could have hired 4 more people. And to me, the taxation and the job creation inside the US, you're always looking at how big that is. You can't actually really truly reinvest in your business and have those brackets that help entrepreneurs reinvest in those businesses. And the other thing that I thought was so interesting about what you said about the 3 different ways that we could lower our taxes is, and I want to talk to everybody in there. I know I've got a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. I know you've got businesses. I know that some of you are at your first time making 7 figures, and some of you are just jumping into the 8-figure category. And this is where I really think I pulled on Andrew specifically to have this conversation with you, because there is a lot of I know 3 of you already that are manufacturers out there, and we take a look at how things are done in the US. And one of the hardest things to accept in our mindset is, because you've been trained since like elementary school, America's the best, America's the best. There's no place better than America. America's the best. And what if you went where you were treated the best and not really trained to think what is the best? So let's put our mindset down for a second. I know if you're in business, you've actually understood that not everything is hunky-dory for entrepreneurs right now. We have more regulations. There's more, there's more payroll, there's more taxes and more just red tape, just so much red tape to go through to run a business. And right now, there's an opportunity, I think, that we're going to see even more taxes just simply because of the nature of what our government is going to be going through and who's in office, et cetera. The number one thing you can do is just open your mind for a second here and listen to other possibilities that can help everything rise up, not just the United States, but really everything rise up. I want to ask you right now, Andrew, I'm going to jump into some, maybe the top 3, top 5 countries you think where entrepreneurs are treated very well. And let's say, I don't care what industry, like manufacturing, I don't know, finance, whatever industry, where do you think the pockets of opportunity for investment are?
Well, so to go back to your earlier point, I don't hire people in the United States because there's a tax disincentive for me. I'm not a US citizen. I don't have a business in the US. There's actually a disincentive for me to hire people in the United States. It causes a lot of problems, and so I don't do it.
Wow.
And so I can hire people more affordably to start. I mean, you should see what some people at our company are making. They're making a lot more money than some people in the United States do, but they've worked their way up. And so we can hire a lot more people at lower prices to start. The ones who are winners, they've worked their way up very quickly. Some people, it's not for them. And so, we didn't lose as much, and we wish them well, but I can't do that in the United States. Now, where should you go? I mean, there's over 200 countries. And so when I look at the rankings around the world, the US is not really number 1 in anything except for prisoners per capita. So one thing I would suggest is, if you're manufacturing, to use your example in the US, maybe you leave that there and you have some kind of transfer pricing agreement between where you are offshore and where a lot of your workforce is. Maybe there's still some manufacturing. I've been a big proponent of, onshore is the new offshore. I've looked at places like the UAE, like Hong Kong, places like Jersey, not New Jersey, but Jersey, as good places to run a business. And I think that there are many others. But what I want to be clear is where the business lives is not necessarily where you live. So I split my time between Malaysia. We have an office in Belgrade, Montenegro, summer living on the coast. I'm in Colombia right now, Tbilisi, Georgia, which I think has been a great, place to set up a business. Everyone's going to be different. I mean, we have some people who run software companies, they go to Cyprus. So it depends on the kind of business. But I think, what I would try and get away from at least is the old school tax havens for the most part, the Belize, the Seychelles, the Marshall Islands. But, when you understand, I call it the tax-friendly quadrant. You and your business are each separate, and each of you need to leave and each of you need to go somewhere. So you can leave Canada, for example. You can arrive in Malaysia. They're not going to tax, for the most part, your foreign income. Your business is going to leave Canada and it's going to move to Hong Kong, for example, or Labuan in Malaysia, or one of the UAE free trade zones, or Panama, or wherever else. And so both of those are going to be tax compliant. You're going to pick the best place to do business, some of the ones I mentioned, and then you're going to pick the best place to live. Now, here in Colombia, if you live full time, you are going to have a tax problem. But if you come here and you spend a couple months, I call it the trifecta. You have 3 homes, 4 months each. You can, pay sales tax, you pay, you're contributing to the economy, but you are not paying on everything. And so there are other countries like the UAE, which is tax-free, like Malaysia or Singapore or Panama, where they're not going to tax all of your business income that comes from other countries. There are places like even the UK where you can basically be exempt from tax on the money that stays out of the country. There are countries like Portugal which have 10-year tax exemptions. And so where you're going to live needs to be tax friendly, but it's probably not where you're going to set up your business. And if your business already has a physical element, I had a guy, he runs a big services company. He's got 200 muscular guys doing work in the US and Canada. He lives in Asia. And so we figured out how much, do we leave in the US and Canada? How much do we move to him and his office staff in Asia? He was able to save a couple $1 million a year. He's still paying some tax because he's got those people in the United States and Canada. They've got to get their beak wet a little bit too, but he was basically paying them for doing all the work when the most important work was happening somewhere else. And so there's so many complexities we could get into, but understand that you can separate things, treat it like a buffet.
Yeah, thank you. That is just brilliant what you said. I'm so interested in adding another thing to this because I have online businesses and I set up my online, 10 years ago, I made a very strong decision. I had brick and mortar and I decided that the freedom and flexibility and mobility were absolutely the 3 most important things. And so, of course, I have a lot of friends that are online entrepreneurs as well. And one of the things that you talk about that I want to discuss right now is why would someone have another passport outside of the one they have? And I thought it was such an interesting thing. And I was like, okay, we got to figure out what passport we want, whether it's St. Kitts or whatever it is. Why would people have another passport, especially entrepreneurs?
Well, I think a lot of people, if you look at your family tree, that's one of the easiest, cheapest ways to get a second citizenship. And so, I can tell you this, I spent a long time trying to figure out how to get my Lithuanian passport. It was a very difficult process. But I would like to, in a sense, reconnect with my great-grandparents. And I think a lot of people like that as just a thing to have. And by the way, if you're an EU citizen and an American right now, you get to go to the EU, whereas Americans can't. But I think that from a nomad capitalist perspective, it's about diversification. I don't really trust the government. I certainly don't trust the US government. I certainly don't trust all these Western governments where what is their solution? I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I heard all of these Western countries basically coming out and saying, we're going to pay for COVID with a wealth tax. Oh, quelle surprise. Imagine that their solution would be a tax on people with money, because that's what the culture is in those countries now is, let's pay. Now, I spend time in Malaysia. I just bought a beautiful home in Malaysia. Malaysia used to have a wealth tax. They said, this is stupid. Now they're a very tax-friendly country. They were asked, are you going to bring it back to pay for COVID? And they said, no. But in the Western world, there's such envy, as you mentioned, that that's their solution. And so my idea is, if you are a US citizen and they decide tomorrow to pass a wealth tax or to pass a retroactive tax, they've done that a couple of years ago, where people now, and it was in the Wall Street Journal, I was talking about it when I was on Fox Business, people are worried about Biden may pass something later in 2021, and then he'll say, oh, but it started January 1st. And so if they do something like that, I want the opportunity to get out. If there's chaos, if there's a problem, if there is, if my passport, the US passport during this pandemic is about as good as some African passports, okay? I mean, you had one of the best passports for travel, not for tax, but for travel. Not anymore. You can't go anywhere practically. I mean, you're going to Albania, okay, God bless, Serbia, Turkey, there's some nice places you can go. You can come to Colombia. But I mean, in Malaysia, where I live, Americans cannot go. And so you're going to have greater travel freedom. I have some people, they're in cryptocurrency. They do a lot of business in Russia, for example, Eastern Europe. They want a passport that gets them in there easily. Maybe they don't want to be an American in certain countries they go to. But for me, what I think the biggest threat for a business owner or an investor is coming up is your country is going to start to squeeze its citizens. And I heard in the last week, I heard 3 other experts in my industry say what I've been saying for years. You will see more countries, whether it's Canada, Germany, Australia, whatever, say we're going to do either in full or to some extent what the US is doing. Because I've already heard politicians in some of these countries saying it. How come you get to be Canadian and not pay us if you live in Dubai? That's not right when people are suffering. But you're not using the schools, you're not using the roads, but it won't matter because they've created such hatred for people who've been successful that they will gladly go along with it. And so if I'm a Canadian, I'm getting my backup plan ready for the day when Canada says, pay us 40% even if you don't live here.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's the part that's in my mind right now, the pay us 40%. And the other thing is, it's the vilification of the wealthy that is happening. It's now, especially in the United States, whatever it is, it's some corporate guy who did it and et cetera. And it doesn't seem like you're working in an environment that says, wow, your business really helps our neighborhood. It created jobs. It used to say that. Now it's like the man abusing people and taking advantage, and we have no living wage. And the other thing is the tax brackets that we have to fill so that you could have a living wage would probably bankrupt us over a period of time, just simply because of the government debt. My purpose for this right here is in the United States, and I love being in America. It's a beautiful country, but Europe's a beautiful, tons of beautiful countries there. The South America, there's beauty is everywhere. The thing that is there for me is that we are the most in debt country in history. There's never been a country that is more in debt than us. And no matter what, it does, sometime we're going to have to go pay the pauper. And it doesn't matter right now if you took, $1 million from each and every single US citizen, it wouldn't dent the 1 trillion, let alone 27 trillion. It just would not touch that. And not having a backup plan for when that happens, or not having an option now, just doesn't make sense to me. And I got to be honest, Andrew, I didn't realize that really till I read your book, Nomad Capitalist. And I want to go to the book for a second because it was so well written. It is the most marked up book out of all of my books in my library. I with the highlighters and the notes on the side to do this and do that. And I want to tell everybody, if you're an entrepreneur right now, you want to drop what you're doing first and go get a copy of this book, because I think everybody needs to have a backup plan, and everybody needs to have a health and wealth plan. And if you want to learn something different, this book provides it for you in such a way that you can read it at your speed and digest it the way you want to, and really make notes about what can happen for you that you didn't even realize were on the table.
So can I make a point on that real quick, Vic?
Yeah.
An important point, right? So I've accumulated multiple passports. It's become kind of a hobby at this point, right? I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. I've got different kinds of passports. I've got some of the passports I like to live there some of the time. I've got other passports that are more what I call flags of convenience. The average person doesn't need so many passports, but I'll tell you what, a couple of years ago, as an experiment, I got a citizenship. You can't get it anymore. But someone helped me, and I got a citizenship in a country called the Comoros. No one's probably heard of the Comoros. It's a little archipelago off the coast of Africa. Not a very well-respected passport, but you know what it was? It's what I called a gap filler. I figured if I ever lost my U.S. passport, this was my a good way to be able to get into certain Asian countries. And so I've been to Singapore, for example, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. 20% of everyone who lives there is a millionaire. And I showed up one time. I said, I'm gonna see how this Comoros passport works. And I pulled up, and then they don't mess around in Singapore. This is not a place that's a joke, right? They look at it, they look at the list, they go down to the sea. Okay, this is 30 days. Great, here's your 30 days, and you continue. There was absolutely no difference from having a passport from one of the poorest countries in the world. And I've become great friends, by the way, with some of the people in the embassy in London and what have you. They're great people. But there was absolutely no difference. I've been all over with different passports, and quite frankly, sometimes it's easier. And I think people have this idea that, the US, yes, there are a couple countries that I cannot go to anymore without getting a visa. There are also a couple countries that now I've added that I used to need a visa for.
Oh, wow.
I'm not really missing out. I mean, God bless all the Canadians. I do love the Canadians, but I'm not really missing out. I've been to Canada, okay? I've been to Canada, quite frankly. I mean, this is not my number. It's a big world out there. So, for me, that I think is really impactful, is realizing that the world does not look at like, oh, there's the Americans. Oh, roll up the red carpet. People are people are people. Obviously, a Comorian can't go as many places as an American, but the places that they can go, I found it to be pretty equal.
Wow, that's an interesting thing that you say, because one of the things that everybody believes is that the American passport is the most powerful and the best passport, because it gets you into more places than any other, and it stands for something, we're the United States, etc. And what has happened with what happened reading your book, Andrew, is that it forced me to look at the propaganda I might have been sold as a young person that is, and it's like on inauguration day, I'm having this conversation with you. And it's a time of prudence, I think, for any business person, because we're going to see what's happened. But my guess is that I believe we're going to see higher taxes come pretty quickly. And it's definitely going to be around business, because we're making these huge, from 2008, these huge, I'm going to call it a form of quantitative easing coming out, and they're going to have to pay for it somehow. And I do not believe it's like one of the things about being where you're treated best and having options with passports and having options of how you do business. And I love the idea of you live 4 months here, 4 months here, 4 months here. It's just like being a snowbird in the United States, only you're doing it globally. It's pretty much the same thing. But the amount of freedom that you must feel living this actual freedom, not the propaganda of what freedom is, which is a lot of duty and taxes to someone else that we don't even get to say, could you not spend that money on this over here? Could you be a little more conservative?
Can you not waste it?
Yeah, do not waste it. That part of it is, completely new to people. So what I want to ask you is, when someone wants to work with you,
Mm.
What can they do? Or when, let's just say they want to investigate, like I would read the book first and listen. He's got a great YouTube channel. He puts a blog post out every morning. Every single morning, I start my morning reading his blog post. And I know you say, oh, I read the Wall Street Journal. No, I'm like, Andrew, what's going on in the world? And on your posts are very good that way. And you have a YouTube channel that is outstanding. I think it's one of the best channels I've ever seen. But if they're subscribe to his YouTube channel, it's Nomad Capitalist. Yes, the Nomad Capitalist.
So yeah, so we've got almost 2,000 articles on nomadcapitalist.com, and then separately from that, I now make a video every day on YouTube, Nomad Capitalist. Yeah,
I love
about 1,100 videos now.
Yeah, and usually you have a cup of tea. You have some brand tea and everything you like.
Sometimes I do like the TWG teas. I've become a real tea snob from spending time in Asia. It's the one thing I carry with me anywhere. Don't come to Colombia and expect great tea. I bring them with me.
Yeah, they're pretty much a coffee place. So what I want to say is, if they want to get involved with you and start to find out what exactly are the advantages of being a nomad capitalist, what can they do?
I think what you've talked about is a great place to start, which is the book, right? Because, and it's interesting, I woke up on Saturday morning, my wife, Mrs. H, we call her, she's originally from Moscow. Her mother is visiting Moscow right now. And she said, Andrew is on TV. He's on this crazy channel where they talk about conspiracy theories, and they're showing him in his videos of how he gave up his US citizenship. And what's the point behind it? The point behind it is Russia is number one. Everyone's trying to come to Russia. Everyone's leaving the West. No one wants to be in the West anymore. They're all coming to Russia. Americans are moving to Russia. Now, is that exactly true? I mean, there's a few of them, I suppose, but it's the same thing. And people go and they look at Russia and they say, oh, that's the propaganda. Is it really any different in the US? It's the best place on earth. I mean, we did a video the other day. It's the 37th best healthcare system in the world. I go to Malaysia. I go to Prince Court Hospital in Malaysia. This place looks like a museum. You get in, you get out, you pay like $200 for an annual check. They take you to the front of every line with every doctor, with every x-ray, with every scan, with every everything. And you get the most thorough check you've ever seen. It would probably cost you $3,000 or $4,000 in the United States. Wow. And you'd move at a much slower pace. So, I think the best thing to do, a couple things. Number one, read the book. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah,
because it condenses. It's not going to tell you the plan. I think everyone's like, what's the best country? Yeah. There is no best country, right? I mean, there's, number one, your best is probably going to be 4 or 6 or whoever knows how many places. I've got bank accounts in 15 different countries. And again, I'm a little bit extreme because I'm researching this stuff and I'm sharing my experiences, but you're going to have different countries in the mix. So read the book, learn what's possible, open your mind. You can legally have a second passport for most people. There's a few countries that still don't allow it. You can legally move overseas. You can legally have bank accounts. I'm not suggesting hiding your money. I've got a big argument now with some of these cryptocurrency guys saying, why would you pay tax on it? Because there's literally a question now on the 1040 form saying, do you have cryptocurrency? I'm not going to perjure myself and risk going to jail. I'll just go where I'm treated best. So we're not talking about anything illegal. We're talking about totally above board. I think the book is a great place to start. The videos are a great place to start. If you like to read, the blog is a great place to start. This is something where you said working with people. I mean, I work with about 13 people a month. It's very boutique. I'm only one man. I've got a team of about 30 people. And we create plans and then we execute them, because I believe that, if you just start chasing shiny objects and you start cobbling together a plan, it never works, right? You get a company open, now where's the bank account? Then where's the merchant account? I mean, you got to do it all up front. You got to know what to do. But I think that people who get the vibe, and by the way, the other part of the vibe is you are a human being, you have emotions. This is not just about lowering tax. Yeah. There is a human side to this, and you've talked about it. It is a commitment. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to know what you're getting into. And that's a lot of what I talk about, is how to overcome that and how to deal with that. So anyway, to get back to your question, get the book. And I think that gives you a great 270 some page introduction. And then you can start to hone in. By the way, I've had more people than ever in the last year calling saying, I don't want to leave the US, but I want a plan B. I want to go to one of these Caribbean islands where I give them some money and in 6 months they FedEx me a passport. And now I have a place I can go. And if the US passport crumbles, or if their reputation crumbles, or if I need a place where I know they have to let me in, I've got it. Until then, I'll be sitting here in Nashville. And so you don't have to do everything that I've done. You don't have to give up your citizenship. You don't have to move. You don't have to live in 5 different places. You don't have to buy homes in 7 different. You can just you can start with going to Armenia, putting $1,000 in a bank account that you can open as a non-resident, and then coming home and looking at your online banking, using the ATM card and realizing this isn't really much different than what I have here, except they pay me 100 times the interest.
Wow. And that's a big deal right there. I mean, just that big deal, the interest there. And I want to talk about that, what you just said, because you mentioned the cryptocurrency investors, et cetera, like that. And I know that we're going to see, in my opinion, the bull run. I think the bear run is done a little bit, and we're going to see some big bull runs. And that means you're going to have to think about what you're going to be doing if you're, I say, even marginally invested in cryptocurrencies. You're going to take some, you're going to have some things that you're going to have to deal with. And for me, that is the idea. I don't mind paying my fair share of taxes. I really don't mind that. I think every community, everybody pitches in a little bit, and everybody, has value from it. But I think when you start getting to 40% or, and I think we're going to see raises in that, probably 45%, et cetera. I think we're going to see stuff we've not even dreamt of seeing before. And I think it's something is so important about what he just said. It's like, just having the option to have a plan B, whether that is, I know that I want to talk about something, I think you call it, if I said it wrong, please forgive me. I think it's an investment passport. It's where you can essentially make an investment in a country, and after a few months, they will give you a passport. I want to say that this passport thing, I don't think it's as hard in some places as others to get these passports. And I'm wondering, did I get that correct? Is it an investment passport?
Well, and going back to your tax piece real quick, you're correct. Now, what's the biggest thing? I was just arguing with someone yesterday. Biden wants to take the cap off Social Security. So if you're self-employed, 12.5%, 12.6% tax, or 12.4% tax hike on everything over $400,000. You don't get more. You're not going to get a $100,000 a month Social Security check when you're Elon Musk retiring. You just paid it in, right? Yeah. Now, as to how do you get a passport, a often difficult but relatively affordable ways. If you have an ancestor, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, we've helped people do that. Just helped a guy get an Estonian passport the other day. He's now an EU citizen. What you're talking about is citizenship by investment. It's probably the fastest, easiest way. And if you're an American, I mean, we've never had a rejection for this, which I guess is pretty rare. But, we help Americans. There's a stack of paperwork this big. I just helped my wife get added onto my St. Lucia passport when we got married. It's a big, fat stack of paperwork you've got to do. We help people do it in our business, but you basically fill that out. You get a police report. They do a whole due diligence. I mean, they're really strict. I mean, they look at lawsuits. They look at any kind of criminal record. They look at, a whole bunch of stuff. And if they approve you, in St. Lucia, for example, I think we just got an approval in about 2.5 months. So the paperwork collection plus the approval, then you send them the money. In this case, it's a $100,000 donation. They will pick up the passport in St. Lucia, and within, let's say, 6 months from now, you can have a St. Lucia passport that lets you travel to the UK, to Europe, to most of Southeast Asia, Central America, Latin America, the Caribbean. They've got their own little mini version of the EU down there, where they've got what's called CARICOM. You can travel around those countries. Now, those are donations. And so if you're in cryptocurrency, or if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a big tax bill that next year you want to get away from, it can have a positive ROI. There are also countries where you can go, for example, and put $50,000 in the bank and get a residence permit. And then every year you go back for 2 or 3 days and you renew it. I call it paper residence. Unlike the US or Germany or Canada, you don't have to live in the country. You just have to commit some funds. It could be bonds, bank account, real estate, whatever. And then maybe it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, you go back and you collect your passport. And what they do is they don't check how many days you were there. That's not their law. Their law is, were you a resident for X number of years? And so those become a little bit more, difficult and not quite as guaranteed. But there are many different, and there are other ways, by the way. I mean, I talked about Eric Schmidt, who used to run Google. He bought a passport in a now defunct program in Cyprus in the European Union. I said, I could have gone to any other country in the European Union and said, I have Eric Schmidt. He's going to come and hire 50 people. Give me the prime minister to sign off on his citizenship, because in many countries you can do that. And so maybe he did that and we don't know it, but there's many ways. So if you're, someone who can create 50 jobs, you can probably go and negotiate with some of these countries. So there's so many ways to do it. But it's important, to get one.
So I think I want to make a difference here too, because I really want to talk about this, because when I first started venturing into this, I read all the digital nomad books. So the digital nomad, there's a difference between being a digital nomad, which is somebody who travels around, they have that backpack on and they're, working from country to country and living off that grid, and being a nomad capitalist. And that nomad, and if you're thinking about being a digital nomad, I want to stop you right there and say, what if you became a nomad capitalist first? And there's a lot of you I know some, 7, 8 figure friends right now that are hopping all over the world trying to decide where you want to live. And you're just, living and taking your work with you, which, I got to admit, I do. You guys know, I film from Puerto Rico, and wherever I'm at, I go, and there we are. But what if right now you could take the opportunity to have a really sharp advisor help you figure out how to go where you were treated best? I mean, doesn't that make sense? You have all these attorneys, you have all these tax attorneys, and you have all these other things that we use, the advisors, to go ahead and help us create money and save money. But what about your business and its expansion and where you want to go, where it's treated best? This is the thing that Andrew points out. We are not running away from something. We're not trying to run towards a better tax bracket. We are working towards going where you are treated best. And I'll tell you, all these big companies did it. They start off in America. And I think that America used to be paved with opportunity. Now it's paved with debt galore. And there are other places in the world that are paved with opportunity too. And exploring those options, I think, are how we're going to expand our businesses in the future. And being able to get a secondary passport, being able to see what other countries have to offer you as an entrepreneur, that just makes sense, doesn't it? So before we end this show, I want to go over just one more thing. I want to ask you, and this might be a personal choice, and I know that I want to talk to everybody here. When you read the book, this is not one recipe fits all.
Right.
That you have to understand that what you're wanting has to be sculpted by what you want. So when you read the book, there isn't this one, how do you do it? How do you do it? Well, that depends on what you want or what you're looking for. So read the information with the thought that you're creating a plan with someone to help you move where you're treated best, and maybe some of the requirements you want to live in, maybe some of the things that you want to operate with. I know that was super important for me, but I'm going to ask, and I'm going to say 3 favorite countries you've lived in instead of 3 best, because I don't think there's 3 best. I think there's 3 favorite, and why.
What I like about the trifecta is you can split it across continents. I do like Egypt. I like South Africa. I'm fascinated by Africa, but I don't think it makes the cut for a lot of people, even though Ethiopian food, fantastic. So for me, I look at Europe, Asia, Latin America. I've left North America. And so I'm in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. Europe, if I had to pick one country, it's tough. A lot of people like Portugal. I would probably choose, somewhere like a Serbia, like a Georgia. It's a tougher one of the Eastern European countries. I might choose Georgia because the food, the wine, spectacular. It's affordable. It just really feels free to me. Certainly in the last year, they've done a few things I haven't entirely agreed with. But I mean, what a great place to live. In Asia, I think Malaysia is great. During this year, when we were just kind of trying to wait out and see, I was in Malaysia during the height of the pandemic. We decided to travel around Malaysia, my wife and I, and we went to some beautiful resorts and beautiful beaches and places I had never been before. We saw really all of Malaysia. It's a beautiful place. Some of the nicest people, like the nicest people you will meet in Malaysia and in Indonesia also, that culture. And multicultural, every kind of food, attractions, consumer conveniences. I think, if you're into this, there's 3 Louis Vuittons within 1.5 kilometers of my house. And then I would suppose in the Americas, I would choose Mexico. I'm in Colombia now. I love Colombia. It would be probably my number 2, but Mexico, you can't go wrong. Other than you spend a month there, as I did last year, about 15 months ago, and you get a little chubby because the food is so good. But I mean, what an amazing, and by the way, as someone who comes from the United States, I come to Colombia, I go to Mexico, and I get some of those little, tastes of back home. And so those are 3 places that I would love. Malaysia and Georgia being tax friendly, Mexico and Colombia a little bit less so, but I would split my time between those countries.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that you explained the food and the wine, because I know everybody's like, yeah, those are really top on my list.
And nice people, by the way. I mean, I have a great team of people in Serbia. We had 17, 18 people in Serbia. It's their biggest office. I was there for 3 months. I always loved Serbia. I bought an apartment with a beautiful view. But, for 3 months, the culture, it's good culture to work with because it is similar enough to our Western culture. But to live there and to deal with just kind of the everyday people, and I had the same thing in Poland and places like that. After a while, the babushka throwing coins at you, it gets a little, there's less of that in Georgia, but I mean, Colombia, Mexico, Malaysia, some of the nice, and again, my wife comes from Moscow. She's like, everyone's grouchy all the time. She comes to Malaysia, she's like, oh, these are the nicest people on planet Earth. To me, that's really important.
Yes. Yes. Let me ask you one question about that, because there's a lot of thought somehow that some of these other countries are dangerous. They're, the talk about how Mexico is so dangerous. And when I'm there, I love it. And the people are lovely and the food is lovely and I have a lovely time. And I haven't seen any of the dangerous part. And what would you say to somebody who is worried about the stories they hear in our country about how scary that outside world is? What would you say to someone?
I'd say 2 things. Number one, I've got a friend who lives in the suburbs of Chicago, and you look at Chicago, the place is a disaster. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, people are being shot all the time, and he lives in the suburbs of Chicago where he lives. No one's being shot. It's very idyllic where he lives, and so if he were to move to, let's say Bogota, the 4th largest city in the Americas, he's not going to live in downtown, the south side of Chicago equivalent. If he moves to Kuala Lumpur, he's not going to move to the, whatever. What I will say is you look at some of the tax-friendly places. You look at the Serbias, Georgia, by the way, number 6 safest country in the world. Some of the Gulf countries like the UAE, in the top 10. They don't tolerate a lot of stuff over there, and they're very open to people with money to come in. If you start a business, if you buy real estate, you can move to the UAE. Georgia, one of the safest places. You could be a woman, and we've had it, by the way. We've had people who've come 3 a.m, stumbling down the road drunk. People have gotten in a taxi, and they get a candy. They've had 3 bottles of wine, and everything works very beautifully. And so I think it's a lot safer. But I would also say, you can go to Mexico City, you can go to Polanco. I've walked all over it, late at night. You can go to where I live in Bogota. You can go to the neighborhoods that are good. And I think it's the same thing you would do where you live. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. There's certain places in Cleveland, Ohio you wouldn't go. So don't go there anywhere else. And, I would say, by the way, Central America, especially Northern Central America, probably the one place that does concern me a little bit. The capital cities in Central America are not places to be. I did have a run-in Managua, Nicaragua. Everyone said, don't go out at night. So that part of the world perhaps is more dangerous. But if you look everywhere else, I think it's pretty safe, and you'll probably find a lot of places that are safer.
Yes, that's the thing that I noticed when I went out of country. Sometimes I felt safer.
Sure.
And Mexico is one of the places I felt safer, and I liked living there. And I love living in Europe as well, because, I've been out, but I usually do a stint of time somewhere, then a stint of time somewhere. I want to tell you that it is such an enlightening and refreshing topic to talk to you, Andrew. Your view of the world has really helped me grow my comfort zone. And I see the world now as something that I can look at and say, now, where can I go that's going to treat me best? Where is that place that I want to go or do business with? And for anyone here, nomadcapitalist.com, please go get the book, Nomad Capitalist. I'm going to plop it up here one more time so everybody can see it. This is it on Amazon. It's just such a great read. It will expand your knowledge. And I think really Andrew is definitely one of the most knowledgeable people about global citizenship I have ever talked to. So when you're looking at something and you need that plan B, and trust me, if you're heavily invested in cryptos, you're probably going to need that plan B. If you're an entrepreneur, and you're especially an online entrepreneur, you're going to need that plan B. If you are an entrepreneur and you see your taxes starting to get to the point where it could destroy the wealth that you've already created, you're going to need a plan B. And Andrew Henderson at Nomad Capitalist, let that be your plan B right now. And that means get your passport in there. And it was interesting. I was watching Robert Kiyosaki and his wife interview you. And the last thing he said to you was, Andrew, I'm going to be in touch with you. So I'm going to end this note right here, Andrew. I'm going to be in touch with you. Thank you for being on the Coffee Break Show today. This is the first time, believe it or not, this is syndicated. We actually are doing this interview at a different time. This will be airing, and I think it's February 2nd it will be out. But right now we're talking this way. So because he's in Colombia and his time was this is the window of opportunity you got. So I took it.
I think with, everyone, you see Joe Biden, you see a lot of problems happening. I'm a little worried for my free time this year, but it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the Coffee Break Show with us. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I really enjoyed talking to you. All right, you guys, I will see you tomorrow. You're going to be wanting to talk about this, and we will talk about this tomorrow. All right. Peace out. Mwah. Bye. Thank you.